Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now?
A viral debate on the Joe Rogan podcast is breaking the internet, but basically everybody's missing a few important things. We're going to react to a wild debate on the Joe Rogan podcast, a disturbing CNN segment profiling an unhinged journalist, and an alarming attack in Pennsylvania. All this and so much more coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the media, the internet, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned, we've got to talk about the big debate that just went down on Joe Rogan's show, the mega popular podcast and YouTube show, The Joe Rogan Experience, between the author, Douglas Murray, who is kind of a classical conservative intellectual and author, and the comedian, podcaster, political commentator Dave Smith, who's popular in his own right and comes from an explicitly libertarian perspective. Now, they were both on the Joe Rogan podcast because they have very different views on particularly foreign affairs when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Ukraine, these kinds of issues, and Joe wanted to have them both on to hash it out and kind of air both sides of this. And look, I'm not here to tell you what to think about geopolitics. I'm hardly an expert on the Israel-Palestine conflict or anything like that, but there's some basic questions in terms of media literacy and in terms of good faith debate and just general commentary that I think need to be pointed out about this debate, where some things, particularly on one side of the debate, simply did not come off well to me. For example, Douglas Murray opened up right at the beginning of this conversation by basically attempting to scold Joe Rogan on his own podcast for his selection of guests. Take a listen.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, sir.
Since the war in Israel began, and since the war in Ukraine began, you've had quite a lot of people who are very against both in different ways.
Yes.
Do you think you've had enough people on who are supportive of either war?
I don't know that word enough, if that's a good word.
Let's say enough people who are on the side of Israel instead of wild critics of Israel.
Well, I've had a few. I mean, I believe God Sad is on the side of Israel.
For sure.
Jordan is on the side of Israel.
You had Mike Baker, Coleman
yeah.
Hughes.
Yeah.
Coleman did it for like 20 minutes, so it wasn't why he was here.
No. I mean, none of them. And none of them is why they're here. You know? It's a good question.
Do you think you've tilted one way?
Me personally?
No, just with the guests you've had.
The guests? Yeah, probably more tilted towards the idea that perhaps the way they've done it is barbaric.
Mm-hmm. But why do you think that is, just out of interest? I'm just interested in your selection of guests because you're like the world's number one podcast. So
yeah, it's not... I don't think about it that way. I just think I'd like to talk to this person.
But
now I've seen some people like pointing this out or celebrating this, like Douglas Murray owns Joe Rogan, but to me it didn't land well. It came off almost Karen-y, almost like smarmy, like scolding him, like you haven't had the right guess. It's kind of audacious and inappropriate. And I like Douglas. I've appreciated a lot of his work over the years, but to go on someone's show and then immediately criticize them for their editorial decisions just comes off wrong to me. It sets a very rough start to the conversation, and it's not really your place. I do think there's valid criticisms that Joe Rogan, with the platform he has, should be more judicious about who he has on sometimes, or if he's going to have on the extreme people that he often has on, he should do more fact-checking and pushback. I think that's totally valid, but coming out of the gates swinging on him like this and trying to like call him out or embarrass him on his own show, instead of using that time that you are on to offer those arguments that you think aren't adequately represented, to me, not a good look, not cool, and just put the conversation off on a rough foot. Though I thought Joe was remarkably gracious about it. Personally, I wouldn't have taken to it as kindly and politely as he did. But that's the kind of thing that if you have a relationship with Joe Rogan or someone like that, talk to him about it privately. Send him an email, send him a message, give him a call. Say, hey, I really think you should have more people on this other side. You're not doing due service. And I'm not even saying that's wrong. I'm just saying the way it came off very no platformy, it came off cancel culture-y, it came off scoldy. And to open up the episode like that, I think started the whole thing off on a pretty poor footing, especially because Douglas was very critical of Joe's guest selection, but also throughout the episode wasn't 100% certain of the names of the people he was upset about Joe having had on his podcast, and admitted that he hadn't actually consumed very much of their work. So whether it was Daryl Cooper, the kind of historical podcaster who's very controversial and who, to be clear, has tweeted some things I think are abhorrent and insane when it comes to Hitler and other people, but he kept forgetting his name. This other guy, Ian Carroll, who I don't know very much about, but is apparently a big conspiracy guy. He kept forgetting his name. And if you're going to go on someone's show and immediately criticize them for the guests they've been having, you should probably have at bare minimum, have a sharp command of who those guests are and what exactly they've said that's so problematic, or that should have been challenged, or that should have had an alternative opinion presented, because otherwise it looks like you didn't do your homework but are still being all morally righteous and scolding someone. And to me, did not come off well. But now we're going to get into the real meat of the episode, where the first big clash between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray happened, and I'll tell you who I thought won this exchange after this. AI is the future, and content creation is no exception. If you're a creator or you've ever wanted to get in on the game, well, it's never been easier, thanks to today's sponsor, Opus Clip. Finding the right moments from your long-form videos to clip for short-form content is really hard, and editing them down into the perfect reels that can go viral is so much work. Or at least it used to be before I discovered Opus Clip. Clip Anything is their newest AI-powered feature, providing creators with unmatched control to find and clip the best moments in our videos. For example, I put one of my recent videos in, and it pulled out a perfect moment for me to share as a short-form video, edited and analyzed for peak viral impact. Look, if you want to support tariffs, if you want to say the stock market doesn't matter, I disagree with you on both fronts, but we can have that debate if you're actually holding those positions. But that's not what people like Benny Johnson are doing. They're just flip-flopping. Clip Anything's time-saving AI capabilities are astounding. From B-roll generation to reframing to filler word removal to one-click audio enhancement. Get started on your content journey now. Just visit www.opus.pro/clipanything. It's really never been easier. Okay, so now we'll talk about the next bit of this episode, the Joe Rogan episode, where they talked about expertise and how important it is to talk to experts. Take a listen to this exchange that Dave and Douglas had on this question.
It's like some weird jujitsu move.
No, I don't.
Where you say, hang on, you know all about this as well. You say, I'm not a historian, but I'm going to spend my time talking about history. I'm not a journalist, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. It's a weird move, yeah?
No.
You don't think?
No, I'm a free American. I can talk about what I like to.
About
so
what
I don't.
You want.
So what is the point
I've
here?
noticed you can, but
but
we
what's
all
the
can.
point?
The point is, what are you pushing? What are you watering?
What am
Why?
I pushing?
Yes.
Liberty, free markets, peace, prosperity, not getting in another stupid catastrophic war, which we're on the precipice of right now. That's what I'm pushing.
I'm still slightly bemused about this move from I'm an expert on this and I have views to I'm a comedian.
I've never claimed to be an expert on anything.
This is the problem, Joe. I mean, if somebody
Wait a minute,
says
you have to claim to be an expert on something to have an opinion on something?
No, you don't have to be. You don't have to be. But
So what's
this is
the
like,
issue?
I'm not a historian, but I'm pumping out history.
But wait a minute,
I'm
what
not
about
an expert,
just-
but I'm talking all the time about
But
this
you're not
thing.
even talking about specifically on what he just said.
No, I'm saying this is my point about this. You say I'm not an expert.
So what's the solution? To not talk about it?
No, it's to have more experts around.
So I'm sorry. While I like and respect Douglas Murray, this argument again just did not hit at all with me. This listen to the experts, trust the experts thing. People aren't so interested in that because we've seen the expert class mislead us about everything from COVID to transgender science and beyond. The expert class has become highly politicized, and there absolutely is a place to listen to and discuss topics with experts. But that's because experts offer, or at least are supposed to, strong arguments rooted in rigorous facts, not just because they're experts. It's a fallacy to suggest that someone's more or less correct just on the basis of whether they're an expert or not. Credentials don't mean that you're correct. Experts have been terribly wrong about all sorts of things. And on the issue they're discussing, both the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Israel's war against Gaza, the whole conflict with Hamas, those things you can find incredibly qualified experts with long CVs that come down on either extreme or somewhere in the middle. It's not as simple as, well, the experts are all on one side. And regardless, whatever point Dave is making about the conflicts or Joe is making or other guests is either wrong or right on its merits. It's not wrong just because they're not experts. And also, at least in Dave's case, he doesn't claim to be. That's the other thing. I've really appreciated over the years a lot of Douglas Murray's writing and his books and his essays, but Douglas isn't an expert. He's an author and a writer and a tremendously talented one. However, I believe he has like a bachelor's degree in English, yet he writes books about immigration, about free speech, about all sorts of complicated expert issues, about Israel, and he's not an expert, and he doesn't need to be. But by his own logic, he shouldn't have written those books, I guess, because he's not an expert. To me, this argument also fell flat completely. There's one final moment from this viral podcast interview and exchange that is getting clipped up and shared everywhere, where it comes to a conversation about Gaza, where Douglas asks Dave Smith a pretty pointed question. Take a listen to this.
Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can.
Right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point?
Okay. I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if you're going to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert,
Well, you have to go and touch the ground.
No, I think you have to see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you spend a career talking about something. Yes, I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay,
it's sort of normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about. Hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I think this is a non-argument. I don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument if you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any of this going on.
So you're not allowed to speak about things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want, as you're proving. But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit whilst developing all of these views about it.
Yeah, so here I have to agree with Dave again that this isn't really an argument. Dave was making, and I watched the full episode, not just these clips. I sat through all 3 hours of it, though I think I was on 1.5 speed, so not a whole 3 hours. But still, Dave was making a series of arguments and claims about the blockade or embargo that Israel has had on the Gaza Strip, which is a thing, though the facts of exactly how it works are disputed. And you can make an argument about, like, maybe it's necessary, maybe it's justified, or maybe it's not. But Dave was making a claim about a series of facts. That claim is either true or false, and whether he's been there or not doesn't make a difference. There's people who support the blockade, who've been there and are from there or have visited on all sorts of times, and there's people who are vehemently opposed to the blockade, who've lived their whole lives there or visited it or are scholars of the region. Again, it's kind of just a non-argument. Having been there, well, it's good to have been there. Don't get me wrong. It's like a bonus point in your experience if you can add some facts or some details, but it doesn't make you win the argument. And again, like on any complicated issue, there's going to be people with firsthand experience on it on either side. So it doesn't answer the debate or solve any actual allegation that Dave raised. Also, Dave has spoken about the conflict before October 7th. But obviously there's been more debate and more coverage about it since then. And he's a political commentator, so he's talked a lot about what's in the news, which is that subject a lot more. But there's kind of actually a pretty good reason that he hasn't been there in the year and a half since October 7th. The brutal, bloody conflict and war. Now, Douglas has been able to go there as part of, I think, typically like Israel-affiliated tours and media tours, and that's great. But again, it's just not really an argument. And I think Douglas is supremely talented as a writer and as a thinker, but I'm not sure he was really prepared for this interview. And given how viral it went, I know smart people on either side of this conflict. I really do. I don't think this was a good representation or outing for Douglas or his side of the argument. And while Dave, made some points I don't fully agree with or am not sure about, I definitely think he came off better across the full 3 hours. And so if this is an issue close to your heart, or if you're an advocate on this, I would take a couple lessons from it. One, if you're going to critique people, be familiar with their work at the bare minimum and their names completely. And two, don't just appeal to expertise. It's not a winning argument. It really never has been a logically sound argument, but after the last few years, it's less compelling than ever. And finally, just stick to arguing points on their merits rather than appeals to personal experience. This is something that is almost like a woke tactic. Like, well, my experience, my truth, is actually not relevant, really, to a big picture debate, one individual's experiences or perceptions. But what do you guys think? Have you seen this episode or just commentary about it, or have you not heard about it at all? I want to hear from you guys. Set your opinions about the conflict aside. Just what did you think of these exchanges and this debate and this episode? I found it really interesting, and I'd love to see more conversations like this between people with diametrically opposed points of views on subjects in person, talking to each other, hashing it out. And hopefully we'll have more of that on Joe Rogan and on other platforms soon. So let me know what you think in the comments, and please do consider hitting that like button if you haven't yet, and do consider subscribing as well. Up next, we've got to talk about a genuinely unhinged CNN segment featuring the far-left radical journalist activist Taylor Lorenz, where CNN uncritically parroted her fangirling and absurd endorsement of alleged murderer Luigi Mangione, all while claiming there's really only right-wing extremism in America. Take a listen to this first clip.
Hilarious to see these millionaire media pundits on TV clutching their pearls about someone standing a murderer when this is the United States of America, as if we don't lionize criminals, as if we don't have, we don't stand murderers of all sorts, and we give them Netflix shows. There's a huge disconnect between the narratives and angles that sort of mainstream media pushes and what the American public feels. And you see that in moments like this. And I can tell you, I saw the biggest audience growth that I've ever seen, because people were like, oh, some journalist is actually speaking to the anger that we feel.
Is it clutching pearls to find it morally reprehensible when somebody allegedly executes someone in cold blood in the street because they have a moral or philosophical objection to their work? No criminal charges, no trial, nothing of the sort. Is it clutching pearls to be against that? Because if so, guilty. I'm clutching my pearls. I think that is bad. And something tells me that if some right-wing lunatic murdered the CEO of Planned Parenthood because he thought her work was harmful and terrible, which of course I would think is evil and don't ever do anything of the sort, Taylor Lorenz and her ilk would feel very differently about the events that transpired there. And I'm sorry, but I just think it's totally untrue to argue that nobody's tried to understand the anger that people feel about our healthcare system. Yes, I think they have. A lot. People have very valid frustrations and complaints and issues with the healthcare system, and that is valid. Supporting murder is not. But I think there absolutely has been a widespread reckoning with how come people are so upset and hateful towards health insurance. Oh, well, people are being harmed by the current system. I don't think anybody really denies that. It's the logical leap to then being gleeful and endorsing murder, which Taylor absolutely does from her social media posts and her public commentary. Although sometimes she'll add a qualifier like, I don't support it, but yeah, it gave me joy, or some sort of statement like that. So Taylor, it's not that we don't understand people's anger. We're just not willing to therefore endorse acts of evil like you basically are. And personally, I don't know about y'all. This is just me here. I don't think I would brag about it if I had massively grown my audience and made myself a lot of money by jumping in on a death cult. That's just me. That's just me. You do you, Taylor. Kudos for honesty and transparency, I suppose. But this next part is actually the most disturbing bit of this entire clip. Take a listen.
Who got her outside court in New York.
So you're going to see women especially that feel like, oh my God, right? Like here's this man who's revolutionary, who's famous, who's handsome, who's young, who's smart. He's a person that seems this morally good man, which is hard to find.
Yeah, I just realized women will literally date an assassin before they swipe right on me. That's where we are.
Not the cackling and basic agreement. Where is the pushback? Where is the journalism from this Donnie guy on CNN? It's really something how he just nods along with this absurd statement. Or Taylor Lorenz sort of speaking for women, but clearly she agrees with this, in my view, based on her other commentary and public posts, saying that the alleged murderer here is a morally good man. No, he might be physically attractive. I'm not denying that, to be clear, but he is not a morally good man. Morally good people don't, allegedly, he deserves to stay in court like anyone else, murder people in cold blood, track them down, and assassinate them. That is an immoral thing to do, a very immoral thing to do. If you believe human life is a right and is sacrosanct, which I do, and I think most people of good faith do. And of course, it's an immoral act in part because it accomplished absolutely nothing, just murdering someone and traumatizing a family and causing suffering while achieving no reform whatsoever in this company's practices or in the industry, if anything, just making them look more sympathetic. So even from a purely utilitarian point of view, still not moral. And again, your response to this unhinged statement, I'm not against interviewing crazy or controversial people, but you got to push back, is to laugh about your Tinder problems. Really? That's CNN journalism? Wow. Now, of course, Taylor is responding to all the controversy and backlash from her comment by taking accountability, apologizing. Just kidding. I almost got you there. By gaslighting us, absurdly. She wrote on Blue Sky, of course, Fox News, New York Post, Mediaite, and big right-wing influencers are manufacturing another fresh round of fake outrage about me because what they really want is to deplatform me. These people call up brands I work with and places I write and take my quotes out of context and try to get them to fire me. She continued in another post, I sincerely hope that people see these fake campaigns for what they are. The right-wing media, these influencers, etc., their goal is to generate outrage and channel that outrage for political ends. This is just Gamergate over and over again. Please don't fall for it. So it's a tad ironic to see someone like Taylor Lorenz, who has cheered on cancel culture and participated in it endlessly in her years as a woke journalist at the New York Times and Washington Post, now cry, woe is me, I'm a victim, cancel culture. But to be clear, I won't be calling up any brands, or I won't be trying to get her banned on any platform. I'm just criticizing her ideas, and that I think she is clearly making arguments and statements that are psychotic and immoral, and unfortunately reaching large audiences with that message and stirring up disturbed and potentially crazy people to do more acts of violence, possibly, is a real possibility from her work. And what I will not stand for is this claim that her remarks are out of context, or that how could anyone accuse me of supporting this killer? She's literally posted like gleeful celebrations about the murder. She's done interview after interview where she says that she felt joy when it happened. So spare me. No one's taking you out of context by just accurately citing what you said. So, okay, I mean, listen to this clip of her where she said something very similar, but she's just being taken out of context.
This issue of Brian Thompson, one of the top healthcare executives in the country, I'm just curious why your first reaction would be to his cold-blooded execution. And people wonder why we want these executives dead. And then you later commented when people were giving you a lot of blowback, I'm not alone, you said. Healthcare executive down with party balloons was on a next post that you commented on. Why would you be in such a celebratory mood about the execution of another human being? Aren't you supposed to be on the caring, sharing left where, you believe in the sanctity of life?
I do believe in the sanctity of life, and I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately.
Yeah, so the woman who said a murder gave her joy is now accusing people of taking her out of context by accusing her of supporting that murderer. Like, spare me. Just because you occasionally at the end of your long unhinged rants throw in of course it's not good to shoot people in the street, and then go on this long rant, I'm not buying that. People should maybe include that in their criticism of you, but you're not being taken out of context. It's not all a hit job. And to whatever extent you're getting canceled or this kind of backlash to you, well, I mean, you played yourself. You played this stupid game for years, and now you're winning stupid prizes by getting it done back to you. So I won't be playing the world's tiniest violin for you, Taylor. And I hope that you wake up and see the light because it's demonic. Everything you're doing, everything you're pushing, and others in the Luigi death cult. I understand the frustrations and why people are upset and hurt by the U.S. healthcare system, but this is not the way. And just one more word on CNN. This guy, Donnie O'Sullivan, is just doing a terrible job with this coverage. There's no other way to say it. It's totally unfair and unbalanced, and he's making absurd claims like this.
What we're looking at here is obviously, when it comes to extremism in this country, I mean, the issue very much so is on the right, on the far right, from Charlottesville to January 6th. There isn't exactly an equivalent on the left in this moment. And as you can see there, as part of our doc, we actually were outside the DC jail on inauguration night when, of course, Trump began pardoning a lot of people who took part in the January 6th riot, and people began to be released.
Yeah, this is an insane thing to claim, that extremism is largely or mostly a right-wing phenomenon in modern America. Dude, do you not watch the news? Do you not turn on the internet? Do you not see all the people firebombing Teslas, vandalizing innocent people's cars in the streets because they're mad at Elon Musk and Trump? Did you miss the whole thing where Trump was targeted by assassination attempts repeatedly and many people celebrated it or were sad it was unsuccessful? Did you miss the recent polling that we covered on this show that said a majority or near majority of left of center Americans think assassinations of Trump or Elon can be at least partially justified? Did you miss all the widespread violence and death and looting and destruction that happened during 2020 and as part of the BLM movement? Like, look, right-wing extremism is a problem too. I condemned January 6th then, and I condemn it now. It was a violent attack. Dozens of police officers were injured. Some of you guys in the comments get upset when I say this, but you can look it up. It's a fact. There's footage. And yes, there are other instances of right-wing and far-right extremism, and I find them all contemptible. I've been very clear about this political violence problem on any side, but do not sit there and say, oh, it's just a right-wing problem. That's obviously not true. It's happening all around us, particularly, I would say, at this current moment on the far left, because the right is in power. But regardless, this is just a totally dishonest way to analyze it, and I think it's remarkable that this was just aired and presented as fact and unchallenged on CNN. I can't say I'm particularly surprised, but somehow I'm still disappointed. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Okay, up next, one final topic we got to touch on. There's been a really disturbing attack on a Democratic governor. Take a listen to this local news reporting.
Scene of destruction, scorched wreckage in the Pennsylvania governor's mansion after an arson attack.
This type of violence is not okay.
Fire forced Governor Shapiro and his family to rush out of the mansion in the middle of the night, just hours after a Passover celebration. Good evening, I'm Aziza Schuler. State police say they have a suspect in custody tonight. Here's what we know about how it happened. Authorities say the arsonist scaled a 7-foot fence to get into the property. As troopers searched for him, he then broke into the mansion and then quickly set fire to the state dining room with what police called a homemade incendiary device. State police also say following the breach, a security review is underway. The suspect under arrest is 38-year-old Cody Balmer. His last known residence was in Harrisburg. He's charged with attempted murder, arson, and terrorism. Our Alicia Roberts has more now outside the governor's mansion.
Security remains tight here around the governor's mansion after the suspect breached the perimeter. State police are describing this as a targeted attack, saying Balmer had a methodical plan where he was in and out of the governor's residence in less than a minute.
Last night, we experienced an attack not just on our family, but on the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
I was horrified to see this, and I'm so glad the governor and his family are okay. I'm not going to get into all the speculations about motivations or who this was that attacked the governor or why. We don't really have all the facts yet, so I'll wait. But I'll just say I don't care whether you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, independent. I don't care whether you're a non-binary or a Christian conservative or anything in between. Political violence is wrong. And it is never okay to take matters into your own hands and try to harm someone, let alone their family, just because you disagree with the work they're doing or their political movement. Again, that's a Pandora's box that once you open it, will come for the people you like as well. I really agreed with this tweet from a professor I follow named Carl. He tweeted, "Murdering an insurance executive is evil. Trying to assassinate President Trump is evil. Trying to burn Governor Shapiro and his family is evil. We must all agree on these basic moral values." I agree with him. It is sad to me that a solid chunk of the country can't agree on these basic things. I also appreciated this tweet from Democrat Tara Girari. "This is why public praising of Luigi Mangione should not be okay. We cannot live in a civilized democracy if we think the way to solve political disputes is through murder." I completely agree, and I was glad to see many Republicans like J.D. Vance and Ted Cruz immediately come out and denounce this. That's the bare minimum, like the absolute moral minimum, but at least they didn't fail that. This can't be tolerated in our society. If you find yourself making excuses for or cheering for some act of political violence because you hate the person being targeted, remember, even that person is probably not entirely evil as a human. Most people are not all good or all bad, and they have families and loved ones. And regardless, even if you don't care about that, you can't have it only one way. You can't just say, well, it's fine when we go after the bad guys with vigilante violence, but they can't do that to the people I like. They will. So decide. Are you like me? Do you want to live in a civilized society where we settle things with ballots, not bullets? Or do you want this chaos, this third world style civil unrest where people try to take out their political opponents? I know what I want, but everybody else, we're going to need to decide, because this can't continue without things getting out of control. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and do consider hitting that like button if you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks again to Opus Clip for sponsoring today's video, and we'll talk again real soon.